Talks. Thank you for being here. We're going to have an amazing presentation today. And as usual, I would like to start by thanking NTI Gymnasiet for the support and the help here for doing this amazing event, and especially to June, that is always like working so hard with the students to make everything happen. And also I would like to say welcome to everybody from Game On Meet Sweden. Hey, Jung. For and I wanted to also say welcome to everybody from Game On Meet Sweden, the game cluster here. June, do you want to say hi to it for something before we start?
No, just thank you, Patty, too. These initiatives and talks.
Thank you. My pleasure. So as if you guys are just jumping in, I'm talking a little bit so you guys can jump in. But if you guys are jumping in, the idea is to have 4 talks this week about different areas in game development and game business. And my dearest friend Craig Chapple from Sensor Tower has accepted to talk to you today about mobile game business, especially in this time 2020, 2021, which has been a very unique year, like very weird to say the least. But there is a lot of data that we should be aware of, a lot of changes that have been going on. It's a very peculiar year, but it's also a year full of opportunities for game development. So thank you, Craig, for accepting coming and talking to people. But I will be quiet now and say, before I have a disclaimer to do, that all these talks are being recorded and they're going to be shared by NTI in the YouTube channel afterwards. So you guys are going to be able to go back to it, especially because I know Craig is going to fill you with a lot of data, and don't worry, you're going to be able to check everything afterwards. And also, if you have questions, feel free to send the questions in the chat. Craig, you don't have to worry at looking at it or anything right now. In the end of the presentation, I'm going to come back, and if you guys have questions, I will ask him. Otherwise, we're going to have a quick conversation in the end, and I will stop now. Without further ado, please welcome Craig Chapple from Sensor Tower. And I sleep out.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks for attending the talk today. 2 seconds then, and I will just get the presentation up and share the screen. Okay, hopefully now you can see that. I can't see the chat, so I'm just going to assume that everyone can see it, but start waving frantically if I start going and there's nothing going on. So yeah, thanks again for attending the talk today. I'm going to talk about the state of mobile games in 2021 and provide some insights into a number of key trends. Take a close look at the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and lockdowns, and the impact that they've had on the games industry. So first up, just a little bit about me. And who I am and what Sensor Tower does. So I'm Craig Chapple, the mobile insight strategist for EMEA at Sensor Tower. I keep an eye on trends in the mobile gaming world and write analysis for our blog on what's going on in the industry using market data from our platform. As well as our blog, I've written articles for publications such as gamesindustry.biz, MCB Develop, and I've appeared on the excellent Deconstructor of Fun podcast, and I've been quoted in media outlets like BBC, Reuters, and CNBC. Previously, hence these logos, I've worked as the senior editor for mobile games business website pocketgamer.biz, which is where I met Patty at Steel Media. And I also created and ran the Pocket Gamer Mobile Games Awards with the team at Steel. Prior to that, I worked at Nintendo of Europe in Frankfurt as online editor, and before that, I was the deputy editor at Develop Magazine, which is a UK publication that reports on the business of games. So in short, I write a lot. Overall, I've been in the games industry for almost 10 years now. So it's going on for a little while. I'm nearly done with the intros. As for Sensor Tower, our platform leverages billions of data points to offer unparalleled real-time analysis for millions of apps and thousands of publishers in all major countries and categories. Trusted by Fortune 100 companies, top research institutions, major news publications, and leading financial firms, Sensor Tower serves more than 500,000 mobile apps worldwide. Our tools include Store Intelligence, Ad Intelligence, Uses Intelligence, a bunch more. And you can find out more by visiting sensortower.com or contacting us directly. So to the bit that you're all actually here to see. So here's just a quick overview of the agenda. We'll look at a short history of the mobile games industry, which is very much an abridged version of certain points, moments, and trends that I've tried to capture to kind of briefly get to where we are today. And then I'll look at how the COVID-19 pandemic kind of changed everything, key games industry trends, and then lastly, I'll look at mobile market forecasts. So hopefully there's kind of a good timeline and you'll kind of come away with this, knowing kind of where we've been, where we're at, and our predictions, at least on where we're going, which will all probably be undone by the IDFA changes, but I'll get to those as well. Lots going on in mobile. So here we go, a short history of mobile. I'll be skipping over an entire but important section where mobile operators kind of ruled the roost. So just as an example of what used to happen, if you think the 30% revenue share that app stores take is controversial now, it was a lot more challenging before the announcement of a certain device. And that was the iPhone, announced by Apple CEO Steve Jobs back in 2007 and released in the same year. This would kind of really change the mobile games industry and market in general forever. And it would have an impact on many other sectors, including other games platforms. But before this, the standard was a basic keypad on your mobile. But now the focus was on touch, and which turns out is actually better for gaming on these devices. It wasn't until 2008, however, that the App Store went live. Obviously, Pokemon Go wasn't released back then. This is where the mobile games industry starts to really take off, as you're able to easily search for a game you want and download it. It's that easy. And the touchscreen input provided a really natural control scheme for games that's instantly accessible to consumers, as opposed to complex console controllers or learning to use a keyboard and mouse to play. As a caveat, I do love console and PC gaming, but I think for accessibility, mobile was actually very important. So while Snake is synonymous with mobile, if like me, you're from a certain era with a Nokia 32 or 3310 perhaps, Angry Birds was like that for smartphones, which launched in December 2009. Developed by Rovio, the title became a huge hit and worked perfectly with touchscreen devices. It's the first kind of big example, I think, of an entertainment IP that made it big on the platform and is recognized the world over and is still going today. So at that time, premium was the primary business model, though this would later change to a free-to-play model. And it's something that took some publishers a long time to adapt to. So while Angry Birds found a huge success with premium, the industry started moving to free-to-play. I should note here that I'm focusing on the Western industry, as free-to-play was already popular in the East. But titles like Clash of Clans from Supercell became even bigger hits than premium ever saw on mobile, and over time has raked in billions of dollars globally. And it's not the only one to do this. Clash of Clans, that is. You've got PUBG Mobile, you've got Honor of Kings, you've got Pokemon Go. Mobile free-to-play gaming has made games more accessible than ever and made the platform a very lucrative business. While some of the business practices have been controversial, over time this has generally become less of a factor. Though that said, loot box mechanics obviously have reached a lot of scrutiny over the years from various Western governments across platforms. The free-to-play model has continued to evolve. So one of the big changes F2P has brought about, not exclusively, but I think is really championed, was the notion of living games or live operations. Publishers were no longer spending huge sums of money to launch a title to success or failure and then moving on. The best titles are the ones that stick around and keep their audience engaged. Clash of Clans launched in 2012 and it's still going strong today, bringing in hundreds of millions of dollars a year thanks to constant updates and new features, as well as just at its core being a great game. One of the best examples for me, but there are many, is Pokemon Go. So Niantic launched relatively what is a fairly basic version of the title compared to what it is today to what it was back then. And over time, as well as adding more Pokemon, has introduced new features, including trading and PvP. On top of that, Niantic regularly runs events, which can result in spikes in player spending. These are either conducted in the real world, unique to the mobile game space, or within the game itself, offering rewards such as capturing special Pokemon for those who take part. So now we've reached a point where mobile is just the largest platform in the world. That hasn't gone unnoticed by publishers, sparking plenty of mergers, acquisitions, which we'll go into later. The reputation of mobile gaming has also improved greatly, and it's no longer just an afterthought for major publishers or a market thought to have poor quality, inferior titles to other platforms. It's the place to be, and you can see with the launches of titles like PUBG Mobile, Fortnite, Call of Duty Mobile, again, Pokemon Go, Genshin Impact, and many more. So to get a closer look at what this history has led to, and I'll also get to 2020 in a moment, this chart shows the quarterly growth in the number of game downloads from Q1 2017 to Q4 2019, just before the COVID-19 pandemic, or at least just before the lockdowns. As you can see, mobile game downloads have increased each year. So even before the pandemic, the market has consistently been on the up. From 2018 to 2019, the number of installs rose 11% year on year to 42.3 billion. India generated the most downloads of any country, accumulating 5.9 billion installs in 2019. And that's going to go up significantly in 2020. The leading category for downloads is the hyper-casual games market. The top 100 hyper-casual games combined for more than 5.2 billion downloads worldwide in 2019. Similar to downloads, global revenue from user spending has reliably risen each year. In fact, as you can see here, it's growing every half year. In 2019, user spending hit a record $63 billion, up 17% year on year. The US led the way for spending, with revenue hitting $16.2 billion, up 25% year on year. Japan, meanwhile, ranked second for revenue, while China ranked third. And it's important to know that we only use estimates for the App Store on Google Play and not other third-party Android stores. This basically means that China still ranks third for revenue globally based on just its App Store spending alone. The three biggest games of 2019 were Honor of Kings, PUBG Mobile, known as Game for Peace in China, and Fate Grand Order, all games hailing from Asia, and specifically China and Japan. While there are some newcomers to the top grossing global games every now and then, like PUBG Mobile, many of these titles have held these positions for years. And really, in the case of PUBG Mobile, it will probably hold that position for years to come as well. One interesting thing to note from this chart is the period of 2018 and early 2019. This chart still shows user spending growth, despite a games licensing freeze, which occurred in China in 2018, and the slow resumption of approvals in December 2018 at the start of 2019. During this time, China App Store revenue was flat, but the global market still saw a good increase regardless. So while China is the world's biggest market, is the rest of the world is still doing great. Okay, so we're going to have a look now at how the COVID-19 pandemic impacted the mobile game space. So a couple of these charts will just be an extension of what we just saw, and you'll see these huge jumps. So first up, we'll look at global downloads. And as you can see from this chart, which expands on the chart at the start of the presentation, there was a very noticeable increase in mobile game installs in Q1 and Q2. And really those actually, while they declined, they actually kept up in Q3 and 4 from the previous year. So in Q1, downloads shot up by 21% quarter over quarter and 40% year over year to 13.4 billion. In Q2, downloads grew further, rising by 12% quarter over quarter and 44% year over year. And then Q3 was up 5% quarter over quarter and up 28% year over year. And then by Q4, installs kind of, I think I got that wrong. In Q3, they fell by 5%. In Q4, installs fell by a further 4% quarter over quarter, but that was still up 23% year over year. So you can see that the peak in Q2 and Q3 really kind of in Q1 and Q2, kind of coincided with the peak of the lockdowns, and then gradually it's gone down. So you had the increase, and then it went down. Next, we can look at revenue and see how it follows on from downloads. Revenue had a smaller increase in Q1 than downloads, rising 8% quarter over quarter and 17% year over year to $17.7 billion. This was because revenue lags behind downloads, and then we saw a significant rise in Q2, which you can see is larger than in previous years. Q2 revenue was up 14% quarter over quarter and 33% year over year to 20.2 billion. Quarterly revenue kind of really slowed down after that. So Q3 it was 3%, and then by Q4 it was up just 1% to 21 billion, which is obviously still a substantial amount of money, but you can see that the growth is slowing down. It looks like we've really reached the peak of the pandemic-related, if you like, boom in mobile game revenue. But the spending does still remain strong into 2021. So it looks like there's kind of a new baseline that we can work from. I hope this data is not getting too much. I know there's a lot. So if you dive a bit deeper into the market, here we can see how each genre, according to Sensor Tower's game taxonomy, fared in 2020 compared to 2019. For the purposes of this research, in particular, we focused on the top 100 most downloaded mobile titles in the US in 2020 versus in 2019. So the overall market may look a bit different, but this is kind of a good kind of view of what's going on. But interestingly, casino was the fastest growing genre for downloads last year. Installs were up 27.5% to 163 million. The top casino subgenre was slots, which picked up itself 79 million downloads. But by far the biggest title in this category was a social casino one called Coin Master, which hit approximately 17.9 million downloads, which is more than 3 times what the number 2 title, Blackout Bingo, accumulated. And yeah, Coin Master is an absolutely huge game now. It was one of 6 titles last year that made over $1 billion from the App Store and Google Play. Another really interesting find was Hyper Casual, which really picks up the most installs of any genre, saw a decline in downloads amongst its top 100 titles of 12.3% year over year, but it still generated over 781 million downloads overall, which is more than all the other categories. As I've noted on the slide, most genres were not able to build on the first half year gains generated for installs from the initial lockdowns, when there was much more growth year over year than we ended up with by the end of the year. Sorry, I've skipped ahead a slide. There we go. While downloads was a mixed bag among the top 100 titles, every single genre achieved double-digit growth for revenue in 2020. This is based on player spending, not ad revenue, by the way. Simulation was the fastest growing genre by player spending last year, with its top 100 titles generating $2 billion. This was largely driven by a game you might have heard of recently called Roblox, part of the sandbox subgenre, which picked up $746 million in the US alone during 2020. While casino was the number 2 category for revenue growth here, it was the largest by overall spending, with revenue increasing by approximately 49% to $4.5 billion in 2020. The growth in spending across all these categories seems to show an increase in both new users and increased engagement of existing players. During the pandemic, consumers turned to their phones more than ever for everything, from necessities like shopping and health, and also to entertainment such as games and video streaming. That's all an acceleration of a trend we've kind of been seeing for years, and those habits will now be hard to shake post-pandemic. And so far in 2021, we're still seeing a high rate of player spending in mobile games. But of course, unfortunately, the pandemic goes on and lockdowns are still in place in many places, or even coming back into force. So we'll kind of see how these trends develop over the next year. And then quickly on top themes. So we can dig a bit deeper into the driving forces behind kind of the genres and then the game's growth. So one of the standout trends, just to highlight, was actually fashion-based games, with downloads of these games increasing by 109% year over year to 991 million in 2020. This was led by titles such as Project Makeover by Magic Tavern, which is a studio owned by AppLovin. Notably, these games were more popular on Google Play, which actually accounted for 84% of installs versus 16% from the App Store. And then crime and hyper-casual themes were also popular, ranked number 2 and 3 with 69 and 66% increase respectively. Just for clarification, if you're wondering, this is for the global market, which is why you're seeing different growth here. And it's for theme, and yeah. So we can have a quick look, kind of really for your interests, at what the top downloads and top grosses. So as you can see here, clearly it was Among Us, with the indie hit accumulating 282 million installs last year alone, and obviously that's just for mobile. It was kind of the surprise of the year. It came after gaining traction with influencers during the summer. And then Star also rose at a time when many people were feeling the full impact of the pandemic and lockdowns. And it's another example of a game that offers a way for people to connect during these times. Other notable titles include PUBG Mobile, which still ranked number 4 for installs, despite a ban in India, a country known for generating more downloads than any other market. And then on that, Ludo King, which is from Indian developer Gameshin, had a breakout year with nearly 182 million downloads. So overall, casual and puzzle titles were the most popular games by downloads last year, though the shooter genre also proved a strong market, with games such as Garena Free Fire and PUBG Mobile hitting the top 10. And then on to top grosses. Here we can see the top mobile games worldwide by player spending. At the top is PUBG Mobile, which generated $2.7 billion in 2020 alone. Depending on how you look at this, Pokemon Go had a surprising year, ranking number 3, accumulating $1.3 billion. That's despite the fact that technically people couldn't go out. They did a really good job of updating the game with more stay-at-home features. But I think you can argue there's the other side of that where, well, perhaps people actually turned to Pokemon Go more because of lockdown as a way to keep fit, and it was something to do while they were out on their own. Looking at the overall top 10, 5 of the top grosses were published by companies in Asia. It shows both how lucrative markets like Japan and China are, and how the influence of companies in these countries are growing globally, which we'll get to shortly. So that's kind of a look at specifically how the pandemic impacted the industry. But there are lots of factors at play in the industry affecting growth. So next up, I'll be going through a bunch of key mobile games industry trends that we're seeing right now. So first up is the Idfa Apocalypse. I believe that's how Eric Seufert from Mobile Dev Memo has called it in an article previously. But it does sum up actually kind of what's going on. So this is the biggest thing in 2021 to happen will be changes to the IDFA, or identifier for advertisers, on the Apple App Store. If it goes ahead, this is expected to take place this month, potentially even today, in the next iOS update. This change was due at the launch of iOS 14, but was delayed to early 2021. Once this takes place, users will need to opt into tracking when an app is opened. The net effects of this is that advertisers will have much less visibility on mobile users, as it's expected that many users will simply not opt in. It's claimed that already 30% of iPhone users manually opted out of tracking in their privacy settings. And this latest update will make it even more challenging for publishers. This is a move that will affect everyone, from publishers that focus on games with in-app purchases, who have new challenges targeting users, to hyper-casual publishers who acquire users en masse, and whose entire business model really relies on bringing in millions of players through user acquisition. Our analyst Francisco here has been looking at this quite deeply, and he says, according to his research, that ad networks could lose approximately 80% of the data they currently track, which will have a huge impact on targeting and measurement. There's some confusion recently about how the IDFA will go ahead. In China, there are reports that firms there were working on a workaround to continue actually tracking player data. But it looks like the changes will still go ahead from Apple. It remains to be seen exactly how Apple would tackle that. Are they just going to let China do what China wants to do, and the rest of the world will follow Apple's rules? And then will publishers be happy with that, or will China crack down? Or will Apple crack down on what Chinese publishers are doing? It really remains to be seen. But this is a huge topic. I advise you to check out Eric Seufert's thoughts on IDFA over on Mobile Dev Memo if you want to learn more. He's written and spoken about this topic at length. As I said, also cheekily took inspiration from him for the name and image of this slide. Next up, we have the Battle Pass and subscriptions. This is probably nothing new to you, as these monetization models are proving to be increasingly popular in mobile, particularly amongst some of the top-level games. Battle Passes, as really popularized by Fortnite, have players spending money each season, which can last any length of time, and rewards players with special content, such as items in Fortnite, such as cosmetic items in Fortnite. Despite how well the Battle Pass has performed for Fortnite, publishers haven't been able to copy and paste this model at will, but there have been a few key successes. One second. Sorry. As you can see from the chart here, one of those is Supercell's Clash of Clans. While still making lots of money, user spending had been in decline since 2015, dropping to an estimated 572 million in 2018. In 2019, however, Supercell introduced the Gold Pass and Season Challenges into the game. This helped spur on a jump in spending for 2019, driving sales of in-app purchases up 27% year on year to an estimated $722 million. The challenge, of course, is maintaining this, but it certainly seems to have stemmed the decline ever since. So in 2020, which what I don't show here, the revenue actually did go down from 2019, but that was still higher than 2018. So yeah, they've stemmed the decline that they were previously having. Another game that had huge success for the Battle Pass system is PUBG Mobile, with its Royale Pass helping the title generate sales of approximately $5 billion from the App Store and Google Play. This number doesn't even include revenue from third-party Android stores, such as those available in China, for example. It doesn't always work, though. Clash Royale used the Battle Pass system, and that hasn't stopped a revenue decline in that game, and actually perhaps even encouraged users to spend less money. As well as the Battle Pass, there's also the more traditional subscription model, which asks for users to subscribe for a regular length of time, typically monthly. We've seen this used by Nintendo in Animal Crossing and Mario Kart Tour to some success, with the latter baking it in from the start and generating more than $195 million to date. So we're increasingly seeing passes and subscriptions proving to be viable complements to traditional monetization models and used as a tool for engagement across an increasingly wide variety of game genres. The next trend we're seeing, and I'm sure everyone is seeing, is the rate of mergers and acquisitions and public listings. I can't update this slide fast enough to keep up with everything that's going on in terms of the images. So you've got the likes of Stillfront, Scopely, Ubisoft, Zynga, AppLovin, Embracer Group, everyone making big acquisitions and investments in the market, meaning more studios are becoming interconnected. Even in just the last 24 hours, maybe it's changed in the last hour before I did this, Microsoft was linked with a $10 billion deal for chat platform Discord. And I believe now, I think it was confirmed that they're in talks. So it's crazy out there. Yeah, as I said, I can't update this fast enough. All this comes as IP holders are realizing the challenges of breaking into the mobile gaming space and are instead seeking deals with experienced studios to fulfill their ambitions. Sometimes this doesn't include M&A, but big partnership deals, such as Nintendo with DNA, Activision with Tencent, and EA with NetEase. But it's not just the challenge of breaking into mobile. M&A is also being driven by the IDFA deprecation we were talking about. So there's actually been quite a few ad networks that are setting up and acquiring publishers. So, for example, AppLovin acquired a bunch, including Machine Zone. And while this huge surge in revenue in 2020 caused by the pandemic and lockdowns has also sparked unprecedented interest in the game sector. The latter is also driving public listings. So Roblox at last check was valued at around $41 billion following its direct listing. While the likes of AppLovin and IronSource are also set for kind of more billion-dollar listings. This in turn will probably drive further M&A across the industry. So M&A is not over, and this will kind of be the year of companies going public. So another trend we've highlighted is games cutting through the noise with big IP, which could become even more important in a post-IDFA world for driving downloads. Utilizing bigger entertainment IP isn't exactly a new phenomenon. But what is interesting in particular is how classic console IP from the world's biggest publishers is making an impact on mobile. As you can see here, Mario Kart Tour generated 124 million downloads in its first month, Call of Duty Mobile 148, and Pokemon Go 163 million. And these aren't hyper-casual titles, of course. These are big titles with IAP and the long-term built in mind. And one we can probably add to that after this week, potentially, is Crash Bandicoot on the Run. So King has long been launching Candy Crush games, and they've tried to kind of break into mid-core relatively unsuccessfully. But now from Thursday, they'll have an entirely new game with Crash Bandicoot. Looking a bit deeper into the all-important revenue, 7 of 2019's top grossing games were based on console IP and PC IP. That's increasing to 8 in 2020. So we're increasingly seeing big publishers either developing in-house or seeking partnerships to bring their titles to mobile audiences, in turn creating new business opportunities for them. Elsewhere, we're also seeing interesting licensing deals, whether that's Fortnite's abundance of partnerships with Marvel and Disney and others, or the recent, as an example, partnership between FunPlus's State of Survival and The Walking Dead. One of the most exciting trends, in my opinion, really fascinating one, is the increasing number of titles going cross-platform. There are a lot of cases where this doesn't work. I don't think we need Candy Crush on console, on PS5. But it says a lot about where the industry is headed with kind of a play anywhere mantra. I think there's a lot of wrong places this could go. For example, you don't want all console games on mobile because the control scheme will be terrible unless you've worked on it properly, like say Epic did with Fortnite. But anyway, Fortnite made a big splash with cross-platform compatibility on mobile, the ability to play against your counterparts on all other platforms. It was a huge hit on smart devices, picking up $1.2 billion on the App Store and Google Play, mostly from the App Store, prior to its removal. Roblox, meanwhile, another huge cross-platform game, has generated $2.5 billion on mobile to date. Then you have Genshin Impact, the latest blockbuster that's available on mobile, PS4 and PC, which raked in $174 million on mobile alone during its first 5 months. And now even Zynga wants in on the act. Natural Motion is developing a cross-platform title, Star Wars Hunters, and Zynga has also made the acquisition of Torchlight Free studio Ectra, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Ectra Games, which will support Natural Motion on a new RPG, which I believe is different from Star Wars Hunters, but feel free to correct me there. By being available everywhere, publishers are able to kind of broaden their audience and improve accessibility, while also not being completely beholden to dramatic platform changes, such as the end of a console lifecycle or the situation with the IDFA on mobile. So I'm nearly through the trends, but there's a few more that are really interesting to highlight, and one of them is China's global influence. It's the world's largest app store market for player spending, generating $14.3 billion in 2020, making it a potentially lucrative opportunity for Western publishers, if you can do it right. Chinese publishers like Tencent and NetEase have partnered with big Western companies on huge IP, such as NetEase and Blizzard for Diablo Immortal, and as I was talking about before, Activision and Tencent on Call of Duty Mobile, providing access to mobile development expertise and an opportunity to make big bucks in both China and the global market. Publishers in China have long struggled to find international success on homegrown titles, but that's all changed in recent years, even without including the aforementioned partnerships. So if you think before, so Honor of Kings, massive, like one of the biggest games in the world, maybe the biggest in China, but globally in the West, as Arena of Valor, it didn't hit anywhere near that level. But you're actually starting to see that those kind of things change, but with other games. So Lilith Games is a really good example. It's a Chinese company that's found massive success with AFK Arena and Rise of Kingdoms, largely in the West. I believe those even launched prior to China in the West first. And then you've got Tencent's PUBG Mobile, which is a global blockbuster, while MiHoYo generated $1 million in less than 6 months for Genshin Impact on mobile, with just 30% of that revenue coming from China. Add to that substantial M&A activity from the likes of Tencent and NetEase, and you can see just how much influence China has on the global games industry. But that global look in China comes as regulations at home get tougher for both local and international publishers, highlighted by the country's App Store licensing crackdown. Just for a quick bit of history, it's actually been part of the regulations for China for quite a while now that mobile games on its stores need to be approved and obtain an ISBN to be released in the country. This ensures that these titles adhere to the country's strict regulations and content requirements. While Android stores have adhered to this, the App Store has acted as an open grey market of sorts, with publishers able to release titles without an ISBN on the store. That's no longer the case, however. So what's more, publishers that have already had games on the App Store without an ISBN had until December 31st, 2020 to provide one, or their game would be removed. I should note that for now, this only affects premium games and those with in-app purchases. So free games that monetize solely through ads are kind of unaffected by this particular measure. That deadline of December was actually extended from July last year. So yes, publishers needed a lot more time to kind of sort it out, but it has had a big impact. So as you can see from this chart, as a result of the crackdown, approximately 48,000 mobile games were removed from Apple's App Store in China during December 2020. The games removed last year generated close to $3 billion in lifetime revenue in China since January 2012 and had generated a combined 4.8 billion downloads. Please note, however, that our figures only capture titles that were large enough to rank in the App Store's game subcategories at some point, and that have been removed for 5 days or more. Ultimately, this crackdown makes it yet more challenging for international companies to release their games in China. It's worth noting that it'll also be challenging for ad-focused games to be successful following this crackdown. According to My Games, in an article on pocketgamer.biz, titles that don't have an ISBN will not be able to run social ads on channels owned by Tencent and ByteDance, which limits massively the user acquisition capabilities of publishers who try to avoid those licensing requirements. So I believe there were a couple of examples where companies basically just, if they were like a hyper casual game, but they had like one in-app purchase, they just removed that in-app purchase and went back on the store. But they'll still have problems without a license. And everyone's favorite buzzword, I figured it was worth a mention. So the last trend I'll be talking about is the metaverse. I'll tell you what Wikipedia describes it as: a collective virtual shared space created by the convergence of virtually enhanced physical reality and a physically persistent virtual space, including the sum of all virtual worlds, augmented reality, and the internet. So basically, it'll be one place in which you'll be able to virtually hang out with your friends and do basically anything, and in which you'll perhaps spend more time than in the real world. The whole concept is really popularized by Snow Crash and Ready Player One. Excuse me. So there are a few signals that we're heading towards something like the metaverse, which is being led by Roblox and Fortnite. Both titles have held events that diverge from the core gameplay features, such as Fortnite's Travis Scott concert, Roblox's Lil Nas X. Sorry, I'm really not into music. Concert, which gathered 33 million views across his performances, and Fortnite's film viewings of Christopher Nolan movies. The excitement around the metaverse has helped lead to huge valuations of these companies, with Roblox valued at last check, as I was saying earlier, $41 billion, and Epic valued at $17.3 billion. I think that was a valuation for Epic last year, so that they may well have gone up. Ambitions for the metaverse are fueling investments and valuations far and above more traditional and highly successful games publishers. You know, as an example, Roblox is valued at 41 billion, but has never made a profit. We're a long way from a full-fledged metaverse, but it looks like we're building towards it, or at least something close, which is interesting. There are loads of other trends I could probably talk about, but I can only discuss so many without boring you all. I will mention quickly one more, which is sort of a trend, which is the legal battles over the revenue share publishers receive from the App Store and Google Play. Both have relented a little and reduced their share to 15% on the first $1 million generated by publishers. Though for Apple, that's only for publishers that make below that in a year. Legal battles going on in Europe and US that could change the 30% standard fee, but it's too early to know if there's realistically going to be any changes there at all. So now we're on to mobile market forecasts up to 2025. For downloads, we anticipate the App Store mobile game installs will hit 13 billion in 2025. That's a CAGR of 5.2%. On Google Play, we predict downloads will reach 66 billion as a CAGR of 7.5%. Overall game downloads will hit more than $79 billion in 2025, according to our forecasts. Unlike the trends seen for revenue, which we'll get to, mobile games are projected for slightly higher growth in terms of downloads than on the apps. Than non-games on the App Store. Games on Google Play, meanwhile, are forecast to have slower growth than non-games. Overall, the mobile market will continue to grow and build on the gains it made in 2020. When it comes to player spending in mobile games, App Store game revenue is projected to grow to 78 billion in 2025 at a CAGR of 10.3%. Google Play game revenue, meanwhile, is forecast to hit 60 billion at a CAGR of 13.3%. Combines the App Store and Google Play games market is projected to grow to nearly 138 billion in 2025, which is substantially bigger than it is even today. So while games is expected to have large growth, though, mobile app revenue from non-gaming will actually surpass that generated from mobile games by 2024. That's nothing to worry about, I'd say, but it's just it's an example of how people are turning to their phones again more than ever. Just to conclude, there's a few key takeaways. The pandemic and regional lockdowns sparked a surge in downloads and revenue. Player spending continued to rise in 2021, again suggesting a new baseline for global games revenue. M&A will continue to ramp up in a mature games market, as will public listings. China is likely to increase its influence and success in the global market, but regulations will likely tighten still further at home. And then we got the IDFA changes. We're taking a step closer to the metaverse. But despite all these challenges the world and the mobile games market face, the sector continues to thrive globally. One last thing before I go. Sensor Tower is doing a survey. So if you're interested, and to get a kind of and then you'll get a copy of the full report once it's done. Yeah, we're looking for just feedback. And once we've got it, we'll release the report, and there'll be lots of interesting data about what's going on in the industry last year and in the year ahead. So the link is here. But if you want a link after, I'll be happy to send it. And that's it from me. I hope you enjoyed this. I appreciate you all staying here whilst I rambled on for about 40 minutes about games. I do like talking about it though. But if you want to reach out to me, if you have any questions, just email me at craig.chapple@sensortower.com. Or if you're interested in the platform, contact sales@sensortower.com, or you can go to the website, sensortower.com.
Thank you, Craig. I have a ton of questions for you though. So you're not gonna go anywhere so far, but thank you very much. First, I wanted to go back a little bit on some of the things that you talked during the presentation. Maybe we can go back on the slides. One of them were on the genres of games that grew during 2020. Yeah, I'm going way back there. It was mostly that you saw casino had quite a lot of growth. Do you think that the fact that there was a lot of instability in the market and people worried about their jobs had any influence on when they chose which genres to play when it come to mobile games?
I'm trying to. So, do you mean, for example?
Because you can make money on these games. Do you think that people focused on going for games that make money because they were scared that they like the economical instability?
Sure. I think. Well, actually, I think in the casino games, like it's not often like real money gaming, so it's still virtual currency.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really just escapism.
Okay, sorry. So,
if you're going to go into topics like gambling and dare I say the word, but addiction for that, in terms of like real money gains, you don't really make that. So I guess it's a little bit different. But I think what we've seen is just that, yeah, people needed something to do during lockdown. Everyone's stuck at home. You can't go out anymore. And I think people just turned to their phones a lot more for everything. And one of those was games, really easily accessible. So not everyone has consoles or PCs at home. So even more people are suddenly like, I'll just look at my phone for games. And I think we really saw that in the increase in downloads in the first half of the year, which isn't shown on this, for example, there. But later in the year, you can see it's still up. But yeah, it's more like people are stuck at home and they're like, I'm going to try something new or engage with something that I've already been playing, but on a bigger scale.
Yeah, but I was the stupid one. When you saw casino game, I immediately thought of real money games.
Oh,
That's why I went like, "Ooh, our real money games grew that much? That's scary."
I believe like someone can correct me if I'm wrong. I believe like some laws are changing around that, and then we could see more of that happening. And you already have things like, which is not really reflected here, but you have like a company like Skills, which is not casino, by the way, but it's like competitive gaming, and then you can make like it's casino. You can make bets on winning, and then you can actually make money. So there are examples of that.
But yeah, fine. And sorry, that was really my bad. I misunderstood, but good that I asked then. The other thing I wanted to ask is, we have seen a growth, and we see that the cap. Do you think it's gonna have a change when people can go out? And the second part of this question is, then you will have more games like Pokemon Go having a surge again, because they are so adaptable to, if you are locked inside or you can go out, that people will go for these games quite a lot in the next trends.
So I think what we're seeing now is there's well, I haven't shown 2021 revenue here, is actually staying pretty stable and doing really well. So excuse me. So I don't think revenue is going to go dramatically down, and I guess time will tell whether later in the year, as the vaccines kind of take full effect and countries get back to normal, then we'll see. But I don't think there's going to be a dramatic shift downwards. I think we'll still see growth, which is what we're seeing in our forecasts. I actually think that the thing that will have a bigger impact on the whole industry is probably the IDFA than a return to normalcy. In terms of Pokemon Go, I mean, I think that actually had its best year yet, surprisingly. But you can kind of flip that two ways. So one is, how did a game do so well when it involves you having to go outdoors and you're stuck in lockdown? But then the other side of that is, well, one, they had the stay-at-home features, which really helped. But when people were allowed to go out, so for example, in the UK, you could go out at the height of the first lockdown. I think once, you could go out for shopping, and then you could go out once for exercise, and that was it. So perhaps in that exercise, people saw it as an opportunity to play Pokemon Go, as something to kind of do. I don't think we'll see. There'll probably be a massive blockbuster hit now with Niantic just announcing Pikmin, I believe, for AR. But I don't think we'll see anything else location-based like Pokemon Go. There's been many attempts. Minecraft Earth, didn't work. Harry Potter, Wizards Unite. I mean, depending on how you look at it, maybe this, successful. That would have been a successful game for maybe a lot of studios, but because it had the Harry Potter IP attached, you could argue it's not been highly successful. I don't think those kind of games are really going to be that important moving forward.
And I will have one more question for myself, and then I will ask if people want to ask something. So if you guys have questions, we can go through that. But my last question would be, with the Metaverse now and this cross-platform being quite popular, do you think that new developers should be focusing immediately in a cross-platform environment, or is it? Our bottom line is it working only with mobile, with IDFA, with China closing, with all these different difficulties, is still a good option for indie developers?
I'm going to say one thing, but as a caveat, obviously, I don't want to give too much advice to people that are going to do this. But I would say that I guess my thought is, it really depends on the game that you're making, right? So if you're making a mobile game, make a mobile game. Sorry, my screen's going crazy. There we go. Sorry. If you're making a mobile game, make a mobile game, and make it mobile. Make it mobile first. And if what you're designing can be done cross-platform well, then sure, do that. But then that is a lot of work, right? So I guess if you're an indie, that's a tremendous amount of investment that you've got to make. So I guess that on the one hand, that would increase accessibility. Maybe you'll get more players. I don't know, but yeah, I would just say focus on the platform that and the game that you want to make, and then if it's available cross-platform, do that. In terms of like, if I don't know if this is a question, but like in terms of like, if you're a new developer that's interested in like the metaverse, I mean, I think only a couple big publishers are going to be able to do that with just a tremendous amount of investment, and then maybe, I guess, assuming there's like the convergence, then you'll naturally become part of that anyway. Or there'll be a platform in future that you can make games for like that. But yeah, like I thought it was interesting that it's taking it took private companies, at least initially, Roblox and Epic, to kind of do a metaverse type thing, and that I don't think you'll see big publishers like Ubisoft and EA trying to do it at all. I don't think they'd have even. I don't think you'd even have shareholder patience to do it.
No, I don't think so either. Yeah, I agree with you. If you guys have any questions, please raise your hands or write in the chat, and you can actually pop in, because if not, I'm gonna thank Craig and let him go. Okay, go ahead, John. You can talk.
Well, thank you, Craig, for a very interesting lecture about the situation and the mobile games market and everything. Thanks. I was thinking about the genre RPG that's been stable. What is the explanation for that? Because it's very interesting with the genres and how people's behaviors are and what they think are entertaining, storytelling, because you see racing going down and all the other categories, because casino, simulation, everything, that fits the picture. RPG, is it like great storytelling, or is this big titles out there? What is your explanation of RPGs being stable?
So in terms of downloads, I'd say that a lot of the big RPGs, they're probably kind of games that, a lot like your big strategy games, they're actually low downloads but high revenue. So that's why we can see, like on this chart, a good growth, high growth in revenue, and then on this one, low growth in downloads. I think that's probably a big part of that. But actually, RPG, one of the interesting things about that is it's kind of been used across lots of different genres now. So it's actually wildly popular, but perhaps you're not seeing it in the downloads here. But for like puzzle, it's other than user acquisition, it's really helping there. So I'd say like those kind of mechanics, or at least like the narrative mechanics, are really used quite extensively in puzzle games. I'm trying to think an example. Maybe you get like Empires and Puzzles, right? And even if you're just looking simply at narrative, like Gardenscapes, Homescapes, and you build a house, maybe there's some sort of, maybe I'm going a bit too far calling that RPG mechanic, but yeah, those mechanics are being used in other genres, which are helping those grow. So maybe while the core's not going that much higher in terms of downloads, but it is for revenue. Maybe that's why.
Because I'm thinking like for our students in the future, on both locally and nationally, like how to discuss genres, what's possible or not for an indie game, and what if you have a vision about like people's behavior and how they consume games. And because we have like this retro movement too, older generation, like my generation, we had a talk yesterday that was very interesting, brought me back to all the memories I have from early gaming. So it's very interesting to see the story about the game before, and are you able to do it with a low budget and make a blockbuster if you have the right story?
Story, if you're going to use it in, like I say, you can probably use it in any genre. So, and it's proven to be a really good engagement mechanic. So I guess then the challenge is if you're an indie, figuring out the way to do that on a budget, because players, I'm probably focusing more on the narrative stuff, but players churn through content so quickly. So if you are making like a core RPG as well, you really got to think about, okay, I'm going to release this RPG in a week's time. Is there still going to be enough content, or is the end game strong enough for them to kind of stay around? As a really extreme example, Genshin Impact, like indies aren't going to make that game, but it's like allegedly that cost a big open world RPG, right? But that allegedly that costs about $100 million to make. And now apparently the investment is about $200 million a year after that. Sorry if you can hear noises, my cat. So they're like that. The example there is basically like you can release that game, but if it's going to be free to play, it has to last. And for this extreme example, it's like 100 million to make the game, and then 200 million a year to keep it going. So that's something you kind of need to think about. One other thing to randomly add is, as with RPG, you can kind of always look to other genres about kind of gameplay mechanics to add. And I think one of the interesting ones was recently like hyper casual. You had merge genre, which is super interesting. And then now you're seeing in that in some of the top, well, the new top puzzle games that are emerging, and even like strategy games like Top War, which 4X strategy that relies on merge. So yeah, you can always look at other genres for interesting mechanics to kind of innovate in a different genre.
Because I'm also thinking like Square Enix is doing combination of real life sculptures and stuff, and then they imported the games to create a different kind of setting, visual setting. I'm thinking about Monument Valley previously, and how you combine puzzles with RPG and because it's like it's Patty knows this a lot more than you too. I'm thinking very interesting about how to have workshops with students for genre examination, really, because it's I mean if it's a dead end with certain genres you need with the budgets, then you shouldn't encourage it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
I mean, yeah. So I'm trying to think like yeah, like I mean I'm trying to think of an old conversation I had a long time ago with an indie developer, and I could be wrong with the studio. I think it was 9 Dot Studio. I don't think this was mobile. I remember in Canada, I had this conversation with him, and he was kind of he's a really great guy. He was quite smug about and laughing about his ambition for his studio, which was, and they were getting investment from the local government, and it was like, you know, what's like the most ridiculous kind of game I could make? I was like, an MMO. I was like, yeah. And then what else is like open world? I was like, yeah. And then what else is like, I guess an RPG. I guess an RPG. So he's like, yeah, I'm making an open world MMORPG as an indie, which sounds ridiculous. But then I believe they've actually made it work successfully. So it's not to do these things, but you know, that's probably. I'm not a developer, and you know, it takes like creatives to make these things happen. And you know, if I'm here saying it's not going to happen, that'll just ruin it for everybody. But it's definitely difficult to do.
And I wanted to add on what Greg said is that no, I don't think there is a genre that is limited, that is out of scope for indie. I think the funniest example I have is from Outer Gaze, that they're developing a game called Hover Grease, which is a shooting game, but it's kind of like Fortnite, but looking upside like from top view, and super high graphics, is multiplayer, everything that you can imagine, everything that Craig said a little bit more, and they did it in 2 people with no money. So I think if the developers have the right mindset and they can do it, but again, taking what Craig said is, there are genres that are more difficult to do, and you have to take live ops into consideration, and you have to take. So yeah, just wanted to add my 1 cent that I'm one of the hopefuls that think that everything is possible, but I agree that you have to have a realistic point of view if you choose a genre that is more complicated and more time consuming.
I just quickly add, you know, obviously if it's mobile, obviously super highly competitive, right? So depending on the genre you're making, premium titles are going to have a very hard time. So it's probably free to play unless you can get a deal with like Apple Arcade. And then the other factors that you have to look into beyond just design is like, okay, then I'm making this amazing game, but how would I scale it? So you have to really think about. I think with mobile, you have to think more than. I'm probably telling you what you know, but you have to think more about the long term, not just the launch, and then also like, okay, how are we going to get the budget to get players in to play my game, and thinking about live ops and everything. So yeah, there's a lot of factors that go into everything on mobile.
That's a very positive term for us to end. Like, it's hard as hell. So
I mean, obviously people do it. Just yeah.
But at the same time, with graphics, I mean, at the same time, if you have something that can go viral, the graphics is not the thing. It's the entertainment value and the influencers, and if you create like this setting of something, a buzz, a viral thing of something's very simple, can also hit. Still, I think.
I think on a positive note, then, just like Among Us by itself.
Yeah.
That was actually released in 2018. Didn't do much, and the advice I would say that I hear a lot is, if that happened, you move on. I think they were about to move on eventually, but they didn't. And then suddenly 2020 comes around, and influencers start picking up the title, and then suddenly, I think that was around July, August, and then by the end of that year, just for 2020, they had 282 million downloads. So they made something that people weren't. They popularized something that people weren't really playing that much.
And it's also, this is very interesting because I talked with my brother this was like 10 years ago, Spy versus Spy. Do you remember that game? Before, and we thought like, this will surely hit, and it was released on the App Store. But Among Us is not the same as Spy versus Spy, but it's still that kind of game.
Yeah, so, it hit at the right time. Well, I say it hit at the right time. It came out in 2018, but it suddenly became popular, and there were a lot of factors to that. But yeah, like, so it can happen. You can like have a huge, a massive indie success on mobile.
And I love Doom, but if I let, this is gonna be a conversation that is gonna go on for the next 3 hours, and Craig is gonna kill. He can talk forever. Okay. I love. Thank you, Doom. I'm really sorry, but thank you, Craig, very much for the presentation. For everybody, thank you everybody that came, and you don't have to worry. Everything will be posted afterwards, and you will be able to check the data. Craig, if you be so kind in sending me the research link that you want people to be part of, I will be happy to share with everybody as well, so they can be part. But thank you very much, and I see you guys tomorrow again, same time. We're gonna have a discussion with Oscar Clark about what does it mean to be a game developer. So now you wanna be a game developer, what does it mean? So I see you all tomorrow. Craig, thank you again, and
Thanks very much.
bye guys. See you tomorrow.
See you. Bye. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, bye.